what happens to those fees? Well, the platform fees can be used to burn RSR. So, but let's talk about this in a little bit of detail. So, ultimately, RSR holders collectively will have control of what happens with that platform fee. And so there are three main options. You can do a direct burn, which is just 100% of the fees go to burning RSR. You can do a liquidity pool token burn, which is a little more subtle. So the fees are converted into DEX liquidity for RSR. So basically you convert half the fee revenue into RSR, half of it into another asset like ETH, put those into a liquidity pool token, and then burn those tokens. So you have persistent liquidity. That's interesting because it's burning half as much RSR up front, but in the event that RSR price goes down, that liquidity pool token may end up purchasing and removing from circulation more RSR than if you just burned RSR at first. So there's sort of costs and benefits to that. And this is something where I think community discussion is needed on whether to prefer LP token burns or a direct burn. So that's something that's going to be up to the community to decide. The third option is that those fees could be collected in an RSR controlled treasury. So the treasury, would basically be under the control of all RSR holders to allocate in whatever way they wish. But at the beginning, I think probably doesn't make sense to do the treasury option. That's something that would make sense much later. So this will either be implemented as a direct burn or a liquidity pool token burn, and that's something for you guys to think about whether which one you think is best, because that'll be something that the community can decide. The goal is, overall, to have the platform fees ensure that RSR holders will benefit from index R token growth and usage. So that's a little bit about what we mean by bringing back the burn. Now let's talk a little bit about this concept of anybody being able to participate in governing an index DTF, because this is a pretty big change from the way that the yield protocol has worked up until now. It's a pretty cool new governance mechanism, I think. So the highlight is that index R token holders can use any token for governance, not necessarily just RSR. Give me 1 second here. Just drinking a little hot water to keep my throat clear for you guys. So in the case of yield R tokens, obviously governance happens by staking RSR and only by staking RSR. But in the case of index R tokens, and technically speaking, with a yield R token, you can make the governor address connected to any contract you want. So it's actually always been technically possible to govern it however you want, including with another token, but nobody's chosen to do that. It's kind of a complicated technical maneuver. In the case of index R tokens, we're going to make it very easy for R token creators to select any governance token, including a newly created token. So you could deploy an index DTF on reserve, and you could launch a new token on Pump Fun, or you could deploy it yourself in whatever way you want and designate that as the governance token for that DTF. You could also use existing tokens. And so then governance can charge a fee to R token holders, like we've talked about, and that means that the holders of whatever that token is will generate more and more revenue as that R token grows. The goal of this is to create very strong incentives for the top DTF creators and distributors in the world over the next 10-20 years to build on reserve instead of building on some other platform or creating their own software. So we, after thinking it through, we think it really makes sense to invite everybody to build on reserve instead of trying to sort of guard our area and collect 100% of revenue for RSR holders, which would cause a whole lot, we think, a whole lot of, competition outside of our universe instead of inviting the competition in and hosting it on our platform. So let's sort of think this through a little bit. So as an analogy, imagine if Ethereum had launched, and the way it was designed, every app built on Ethereum required that Ether would be that app's governance token, and all value of every app would hence flow to ETH. Well, in some sense, you could think that that would make ETH a lot more valuable. If you just imagine every single DeFi app on Ethereum, all that value is going to ETH holders, well then obviously ETH would be more valuable. But if that had been the case from the beginning, way fewer teams would have built applications on Ethereum, right? Only large ETH holders would have had the incentives to do so, right? It's like with the way that Ethereum works, and anyone can create their own token, raising new capital and incentivizing new projects is super easy, right? Like just think of all of the token sales and team token distributions and so on that have caused the enormous amount of building on top of Ethereum. That would all be basically impossible if you weren't really able to create your own token and have the value flow to that. And so if you think about it, even though ETH doesn't directly collect value from anything built on top of Ethereum other than obviously the gas fees and the transactional use of ETH, that has made ETH way more valuable than if it had tried to collect 100% of the value that was built on top of the platform. So basically, I strongly believe that if Ethereum had worked that way, it would have been quickly outpaced by competitors who allowed people to create, their own tokens on top of the platform. And I think that analogy applies here as well. And where basically, if we allow custom tokens, that's going to encourage a lot more innovation and participation than if we don't. So that's part of the reasoning. But let's So imagine you create a new index R token. This can be done at almost no cost, and you can mint a new governance token. Imagine then that you have the ability to distribute that governance token that you start off owning 100% of. You can distribute it to team members, to partners, to investors, in order to gather a bunch of capital and energy to launch your DTF. So it's no longer necessarily just a hobby project. You suddenly have the ability to marshal capital and resources to make your DTF happen. You could also imagine streaming that token to early users or liquidity providers to boost the adoption and liquidity of your new DTF. And so, as that DTF grows, the governance token holders would all be able to benefit because their tokens stand to receive more income from the DTF. And so what happens? Well, those token holders end up being incentivized to promote that particular DTF, right? And so now you have the sort of standard decentralized crypto marketing force of like token holders going out and shilling, working for your DTF in a way that we don't quite see with yield R tokens today, right? If you think about it, it's like RSR holders collectively want existing R tokens to get big, but you don't have any particular allegiance to any particular R token. It's like whichever one gets big, we all benefit. And so you don't quite get the same like allegiance and sort of shilling that particular token and sort of incentive to promote something, right? It's more of a collective action challenge. So I think this could be a stronger marketing force. And so that community of token holders, of Gov token holders, would be incentivized to push the DTF success. In addition to, they would probably also shill the governance token itself because it's a token they hold and they want it to go up. So, if you think about that in the long term, maybe you as the creator sell your share of the governance tokens and you move on. And that's fine, because the DTF can continue thriving with a committed base of governance token holders that are all incentivized to do things to drive its growth, right? So similar to any decentralized crypto project, it creates this incentive among the community of token holders to continue to take action to support that DTF. So that's sort of thinking about how these incentives could work with an individual or an entrepreneur starting a DTF. But what about if an existing company that's maybe an existing TradFi institution or like a fintech platform creates their own DTF? So let's call this example company TradFi Giant Inc. They decide that they want to enter the DTF space, that they want to compete in the creation and profit from DTFs on the blockchain instead of just, say, ETFs in traditional finance. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to conduct a build or buy analysis. A whole team probably in their organization is going to try to figure out, should we write a bunch of software to do this in smart contracts ourselves? Or should we create this using some existing protocol or technology or partner with someone to do it? Let's say that they choose to build on Reserve, right? Why? Because, well, it's the largest DTF protocol, so they would certainly look at it in their analysis. And they discover, oh, there's actually this like really elegant mechanism where we can capture the portion of revenue that we deserve, and the protocol can capture what it deserves. And so that causes them to choose, in this hypothetical, to build on top of Reserve instead of doing something that's totally on their own, totally competitive with Reserve. And so they would be able to create their own governance token. Let's say the TradFi Giant Token, TFGT. And they could use that same token to govern, 100 different DTFs that they deploy on Reserve, right? So they create their TradFi governance token, maybe they distribute it to some of their strategic partners, but they hold a lot of it themselves. And then they use it to govern their whole family of DTFs. That's like a great situation for them. That's a great way for them to profit from their work while leaving the sort of development of this core technology to the team that's proved themselves to be the best at that in the entire industry. And so then they retain their share of the fees by holding that token, and the Reserve ecosystem benefits from hosting them, right? So this is a great outcome all around. The TradFi Giant markets its ETFs, on their own platform to their own customers. They grow, and the more they grow, the more the platform fees increase. And so RSR holders benefit from that as they get to direct that platform fee from growing DTFs. So that's those two examples, I hope, help to illustrate the strategic reasoning behind this change. And I personally think that, if we look at the number of R tokens that have been created so far on the Yield protocol, I hope that we see quite a lot more index R tokens created on the index protocol, because there will clearly be an even stronger economic incentive to create them, to create whichever type first in order to get yours to be popular, to gain those network effects, because there's real ownership involved. There's real sort of long-term income potential that folks can tap into.